Three times in his career, my guest today saw a structural shift in how the media sector works before anyone else could actually identify it. And he built the infrastructure for it before the rest of the industry caught up with that. The first time, he helped Prince build the first major direct to consumer digital music store at the moment when no one in the entire music industry believed that there was actually a path for artists themselves to have a relationship with audience in the way that John actually did. It won Prince a Billboard Award. He got the Webby Award. He got Lifetime Achievement Awards, amongst many other awards. The second time, he powered live streaming. And you can look at Oscars and others and royal weddings, building the connectivity tissue of live media at the largest scale that the world has ever seen. And the third time, you would think that that is in 2012, he bet on something that did not yet have a name. The audience were about to stop watching content and start participating. Tell me about that. And many years later, that bet is now what over $1 trillion global shift in audience, whether you're talking about audience generated content, and he calls it the participation economy. On Petrocelli, welcome to the Clarity Mandate.
Dr. Tu, thank you very much for having me. Great introduction. I hope I can live up to it.
You worked with Prince to build the first major artist-owned direct-to-consumer digital music store at a time when no one in the industry even thought that that was a possible business model for artists to have that kind of a direct relationship with the audience. How did that idea get even a hearing? What made Prince and all the people that you work with actually willing to make a bet on an idea like that?
Prince was always a boundary pusher, an innovator, and I really think he was fueled by his curiosity to eliminate barriers in his creativity and connect directly with his fans. But for him, his fans were all over the world, and this was the early days of the internet. This is, in fact, when we were primarily a downloading society versus, streaming before infrastructure had propagated. And I was involved in the early days of what were called the format wars. People might remember there was Windows, Microsoft had Windows Media Player, Real had the Real Player, and Apple had QuickTime. And these were the video, they were all fighting for your attention on the desktop, use our format. And that was a big strategy for those three companies. And I was acting in my capacity as Switzerland, right? I was neutral. I was the delivery service provider, which is back then called a content delivery network, which is still a term for today. And I was contacted by Apple, who said, "Hey, you're doing a wonderful job with QuickTime for our creative clients and broadcasters and the record labels. We've been approached by an artist who wants to go solo and do this themselves. Would you be interested in speaking with them?" And I said, "Sure. Who is it?" And they said, "It's Prince." And I was a lifelong fan of everything that he had done. And, it was a little bit of a challenge. Today, it's still a challenge, I think. Really complex technical conversations and explanations. They have to be, I like the reason I named my company Bulldog. Bulldog is kind of what you see is what you get. And I wanted to dispel some of the myths around technology and try to make it as explainable to somebody as I could. And trying to go back and forth with his team. I was involved in digital rights management, kind of anti-piracy. And back then, you might remember, it was the world was trading music on file sharing networks, and which really
That's right.
meant no reward to
Yeah.
any artist of any kind. It was largely pirating in a lot of ways. So I took a file of Purple Rain and I had it encrypted and I sent it over to his team. And when you went to play it, it said you have to be authorized in some way, be a member of his fan club, pay 99 cents for this song. And I got this email back in the middle of the night that said, "A Prince says, in quotes, this is exactly what I want to do." And I realized this is how he communicates in writing as well. And keeps very interesting hours. So I would get email at that time of the night. And we quickly got to a deal. And I built him this direct to consumer music service called the Musicology Download Store. And I was blown away. He filled it with singles, with audio tracks, full length records, clips and performances of him performing live. He wrote two songs a day throughout his life. And he had this legendary thing called the vault. And he would just
Oh,
literally had a
wow.
vault with a key and he would put all this into it. And when he had this connection that we had built for him, he maximized it and he
Wow.
delivered massive amounts of content to his fans and then came back and challenged us and said, "Hey, I'm about to go on a big tour. And now I want to take the best seats, whether I'm playing Madison Square Garden or the Staples Center, and I want those 3, 4, 5,000 seats to be available exclusively through my fan club." So we had to build a ticketing platform as
Wow.
well, which the way he directed it completely was a countermeasure to ticket scalping because you had to buy it through the club, and when you went to Staples Center or Madison Square Garden, there'd be 20 windows,
Yeah.
and 4 or 5 of them would be just for Prince fan club, and you had to walk up with your driver's license and your credit card to authenticate yourself. So that opened my eyes to the possibilities of what technology could do
Wow.
for a personality of that stature and how they could empower he or she to connect with anybody anywhere in the world. And that was a real, I think, eye-opening, monumental shift in how I looked at technology and how I eventually would walk through the parts of my career.
Wow, amazing, John. Thanks for sharing that story with such clarity. And you have described the shift you are living through now as moving from passive broadcasting to what you now call the participating or participation economy, where the audience stops watching and starts participating. So I would like you, in the interest of our listeners, to define precisely what does a viewer do differently when they are participating rather than watching, because right now we have lots of information overflow and everything, but what is really participating? What does that really mean? And why does that difference actually matter commercially, if you might look at what it means and what is the commercial implications of that?
Yeah, so I've executed hundreds, if not close to 1,000 live streams over my 20 years. And it's an industry that's only been around about 20 years. So it's, to me, I've been able to observe what transpires in these live broadcasts. And what I started to see was the audience really didn't want surveillance video or a webcam, and they didn't want someone just taking a TV feed and quote putting TV on the internet. They wanted collaborative, participatory experiences. And that was largely fueled by the experience economy, where you had these younger consumers who valued a shared experience with their friends over a material purchase. And that translated into digital and streaming experiences where they do want to have a social channel where they can chat. And I realize that's critical. Beyond that, curating that social channel to where the conversation is related to the video and it doesn't have trolling and all kinds of off-topic commentary. When the conversation is actually related to the video, it creates a higher level of engagement. And then we also realize how do we really affect that participation? and turning on tools that allow for not just chat, but polling, trivia, graphics, calls to action. You've now transformed the viewer into a participant in that experience. And that leads to a couple of transformational shifts. One, you and I are more likely to come back to a future broadcast from because it does have this level of interactivity. Two, I could say, hey, Dr. Toot, I'm enjoying this really fascinating live experience, and it's allowing us to comment and chat and answer trivia. Come join, so the idea that people would now invite their friends along as well. And then the final thing, which I think really drove my business, is that it unlocked watch time. And we as a society have dropped down to, I think, the beginning of this century, the average human attention span was around 12 seconds. It's now dropped down to about 8. And brands are trying to get attention and they're suffering. They can only get a matter of seconds. And what I found out was the cross section here was getting brands to direct their advertising and sponsorship dollars to this medium because it unlocked these really powerful watch times. And it would also create more content for the consumer, an interesting concert in an interesting part of the world that you normally wouldn't get to see, or maybe it's a product launch or a movie premiere or something to that
Wow.
effect. And that chain reaction leading to watch time, I think, has really transformed the live space. But it all comes back to your point here is a collaborative participatory experience is far better than just a passive surveillance video experience.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I think that even the consumers feel empowered. They feel like content is not just pushed at them, but they are actually co-creating that content, and that's quite empowering. But you, John, sold companies to global giants like Google, amongst others. Then you sold your business to AEG and you became a vice president there. And then came 2012, you left and you started Bulldog DM from scratch. And you bootstrap the company for over 13 years now. Most people who has reached the level of success that you had in corporate would prefer to stay in that environment where there are systems and you are an executive and you're part of the directors. So, what made you to walk away from the security, the systems to build something independent? And that was actually not proven at the time.
Well, you're right. I'd sold my business to AEG and I was operating a business there. And AEG is a live company in its DNA, right? The world's largest presenter of live music and live sports, the number two company behind Live Nation, owners of a third of the LA Lakers, the Kings in MLS, the Kings in NHL, Galaxy in MLS, and things like Coachella and LA Live, the whole campus.
Mhm.
So for me, it was kind of heightened my awareness and also access to just this growing live events community or just overall industry. And at the time of the acquisition, I had gone to YouTube and said, this is a business that you should contemplate. You're an on-demand platform, but you'll be able to, one, bring really engaged audiences to the platform for these live experiences. And then when the live stream is over, they can then enjoy content related to that experience from on-demand content. And we had this kind of proof of concept with Alicia Keys performing at an AEG venue in Times Square and brought to the viewer on YouTube by American Express. And my team executed and produced all the live multi-camera video, the live video player on YouTube, the conversation widgets.
Yeah.
And at the conclusion, YouTube came back to me and said, "You were right. We had a very happy audience of viewers. We had a delighted music artist in Alicia Keys. And by the time the concert ended, the pre-sale of her new record was trending the top 10 in iTunes. Back then, it was a kind of iTunes space. And then they said, we had a really happy brand at American Express. We want to be in this business, but we don't do on demand. We're a live. We don't do. We're an on demand company. We don't do live. So I struck a deal with YouTube, and for about 3 years, knowing they were eventually going to build out their own technology and their own stack. We powered everything on that platform. So that was things like Coachella, Bonnaroo, Rock in Rio, Royal Wedding, product launches. In addition to the other business I was doing inside of AEG and then my external clients, I thought, wow, this is where the world is headed. And the world won't be just AEG experiences or just YouTube experience. It'll be other forms of content, other different promoters. It'll be different places to consume it. And I thought I want to get ahead of that curve. And I spun out of AEG. I formed this business. I took a few key people with me. In retrospect, I was probably early to the market, but that allowed me to go and sit with brands and ask them, what are your challenges? What's keeping you up at night? What hurdles are you trying to overcome? And I heard this recurring theme of we have to deal with cord cutting, brand safety, and ad blocking. And so it's very hard for us, on top of that, to get our heads around this younger generation that is prioritizing the experience economy. And so if you can help us do that, we're all ears. So I decided that having the time to take those meetings and do that listening, and then build a strategy that addressed those challenges, that helped us put us on the map and get us into business with some of the biggest, brands in the world because we had, I think, gone through that process of, hey, I'm an early entrepreneur. I've got to get my bearings very quickly because I don't have investments and how that world works. And fortunately for me, I really leaned into people like Mark Cuban who espoused understanding customers, not being afraid to make mistakes, and really built and emphasizing sales, right? Because if you have customers, your company, I've heard him say, no
Yeah.
sales, no company.
No business.
Yeah,
That's right.
sales
That's
cures
right.
all. You hear him espouse that on Shark Tank, but that was kind of the process and the thought thinking of how I would launch and start this business.
Wow, that's really amazing. And Bulldog DM has now gone over to produce over 1 billion audience engagement for brands like Apple, Coca-Cola, Netflix, the NFL, and amongst others. So when a Fortune 500 brand comes to you wanting a live stream, what is the most common mistakes they are making before they even talk to you? The assumption behind, or that really gives you the opportunity to correct, to help them, and to guarantee that they actually have better performance.
I think it comes down to the best practice that we evangelize is just that thesis of transform that viewer into a participant. If you're able to do that as your foundation, the possibilities open up, and there's a lot to accomplish there because we're also working with them on the idea of not just doing this once, but making it an actual practice. I think with a brand like AT&T, we've done, I think, 24 live streams in our time with them. And when we got into business with them, they had just signed a corporate sponsorship agreement with the NBA, and they also had a pretty large agreement with the NCAA for some of the big things like the Final Four and the college football playoffs. So we would go to these experiences with them, and the idea is, and this is, I think, the blueprint for brands. Brands are very big marketers in the world of experiential. It's very important for them. They're realizing, wow, the consumers want to have experiences. It's like their biggest priority, and we're able to help them amplify that. It's kind of like the idea of Coachella. It's 125,000 people, but you've seen public stats that say, the year Beyonce performed, there were 89.2 million viewers on YouTube. And the idea for brands, even that's the grandest level you could execute at, but just the general notion of taking your experience and amplifying it to 10 to 20x size your audience, but also driving a watch time that is beyond little microseconds. It's 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. That's getting brands to think that way. I think I would classify or answer the question saying That's the biggest challenge, and some of the misconception is you can't just put up a webcam and think that it's going to take you to the next level. Because consumers are savvy, they understand it. We've all come through the pandemic where live streaming became a global adopted user behavior. If you were a grandparent, you were Zooming with your family. If you were a child, you had to take distance learning.
That's right.
Anybody in a corporate environment now had to attend trade shows virtually. So everybody figured out how to open a link and play video and then participate, whether it was Zoom or Google Meet or all of the 4 or 5 other Microsoft Teams platforms. And I think kind of driven the industry. So brands now today, I think they're very open to listening. Hey, help us not only do this, because I think I see a big shift to authenticity. And it's hard to fake something that's happening in the moment. And people don't mind if there's a potential glitch or someone loses their train of thought in a conversation. It shows them we're kind of all in this together, even if it's a couple years ago. I always use this example. Adele was performing at the Grammys and it was on the stage away from the main stage in the middle of the arena, and she was with a piano, and she's 10 seconds into the song and asked to stop the song and reset the piano and start again. And people, oh wow, she's stopping her performance and delivered an incredible, amazing song that was all over the news the next day. And well, I'm not saying people want errors or challenges, but live is you can't really fake it. It has to be an authentic experience, and that also presents challenges for brands that are very nervous about that as well. But luckily, we work with brands and we've been doing it for so long that we build in all kinds of measures. There's no single point of failure in the workflow. There's a lot of redundancy. And also, I always say there's 3 things you must do: rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. And that eliminates a myriad of problems. But I think that's been the thought process I've seen brands go through.
Wow, that's amazing. And bringing the authenticity to everything. It's because we are, and now that takes me to the next question, because now we are in the AI era where people are really battling. And if you look at AI now being layered into live streaming, personalizing recommendations, driving real-time product suggestions during live streams, even helping product development producers to produce content. So from where you sit with over 2 decades of experience in the industry, what does AI actually change about live content, and what is it that AI cannot change, no matter how advanced AI could be, that still brings reality to live content?
It's a super interesting question for me, both for my industry that I operate in, but also for me as an entrepreneur. And I found, to answer the question from the entrepreneurial perspective, any tools that help me run my business more efficiently, more accurately, they're very welcome. A lot of times we're doing broadcasts that are international that require captions. And AI has been a terrific tool to help do real-time captioning. Also, there's a lot of great accuracy that comes with that versus the manual process, which can take time. And again, it's a live broadcast. People want those captions to be aligned with the actual conversations and things that are happening. So, in terms of workflow things, AI certainly has helped us operate efficiently. But also, I've heard this from advertising and marketers, is live is the last bastion of true authenticity because people want to see something happening truly, truly in the moment. And in the live world, we're looking at 2 major developments. On the one hand, Netflix has now made a very big commitment to live events and live experiences. It started with things like the Tom Brady roast and Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock comedy shows. And now you're seeing the NFL on 2 games on Christmas Day. You're seeing the WWE on Monday nights, now Major League Baseball. That's a ripple effect. Now, platforms like Disney, Apple, and Amazon, they're also really ratcheting up their live offerings. And because I think they realize that live will bring consumers to their platforms to enjoy the show. Potentially, they could offer some sort of conversion over to subscription, but also it's a very powerful back to the watch time. It's a massive tool for brand sponsorships. Like the Mike Tyson fight
Mhm.
sold out, the advertising possibilities. Both of those NFL games sold out their advertising as well. So it's also, if you're a shareholder, obviously you want to see the stock perform well, and this layer of ad-supported sponsorship dollars is a whole massive new opportunity for that. And then the other dynamic, ironically, is the advent of e-commerce live streaming, which in China is a estimated 400 to 600 billion dollar business, and that's now propagating out to other parts of the world. Here in the U.S., TikTok Shop started in September of 23 and will do reportedly $26 billion this year, which is more than the e-commerce business of Target,
Wow.
Lowe's, and Best Buy. So we're seeing younger consumers now have, I think it's 58% of millennials have adopted live e-commerce shopping, and 80% of Gen Z. And now because they can ask questions, and this goes back to, I think, the question about AI.
Yeah.
You're having a host talking, and they're telling you a story versus really selling you a product. And then they'll introduce, hey, by the way, this is the product and it is available right now and it's 24% less than it normally is. You can ask questions. Oh, does that come in blue? Is the waistband, is it elastic? How long will it take for, shipping? And the one of the interesting outputs there is that it's reduced product returns by 40% because they have that moment of true
Mm.
interactive conversation happening. And so I think it's interesting, right? Maybe AI can help execute, maybe changing some camera feeds and doing some of the production work. But at the end of the day, I think it's what happens in that live video, and that's where people want that direct connection. I have seen discussions about maybe it's a broadcast of AI, but in the live world, I just don't see how that's going to scale, given that customers are now looking at, or everybody's looking at, hey, this is the place where it's all happening and it's all real. It may be powered by some efficiencies with AI, but we want to have this is a place we look at as a safe haven of true content being created in the moment on the fly.
Wow, that's super, super powerful. And we are living in the greatest technological advanced eras of our lifetime right now with
Sure.
the AI. But thank you for really clarifying that for our listeners. And your work, John, has been recognized with different awards, whether you're looking at one show, you're looking at Biz Bash Awards, and essentially, in my estimation, every major recognition in the creative and marketing industry that is of any note have actually recognized the work that you do. And of all that, John, there is one project that the industry didn't fully recognize at the time, but that you now believe was actually the most important thing you ever built. What made that project in a way that wasn't obvious to the industry or even to the client at the time?
Yeah, there were two. One was a STEM project called She Can STEM, and it empowered young girls to build a virtual world inside of Minecraft using STEM knowledge or academia or those kind of processes. And it unlocked a concert inside of Minecraft once they all went through that shared experience together. And that was, for me, a really eye-opening, really fascinating overall experience. And I think right next to that for us was a couple of years back, we commemorated the JFK moon landing. And I'm a Bostonian, so we got to go to the JFK library and execute this experience. And it was really timed down to the exact second that we had liftoff. And it was a pretty interesting engagement. And it was also the first live stream of an augmented reality experience. But it was so full of fascinating history and how, President Kennedy had made this pretty, at the time, a very
Yeah.
wild statement that we would get to the moon in this really condensed, short time frame. And back then, that was the only thing people saw on TV or in the news. So those two experiences for me didn't get, it's not like working on a Coca-Cola project or Coachella or anything, but they were these really kind of moving and informative experiences that either helped younger people, but also brought history on the other side of the coin forward, and also helped, I think, younger people understand what some of the things that happened in the country's history that they may have not been top of mind. And doing it with live video and things like the Minecraft platform and augmented reality, I thought were very cool ways to spin something and make them more appealing to a broader audience of any age as well.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that's fascinating. Thanks, John. And a brand leader or an entrepreneur in our audience who maybe has never run live stream, because I believe there's still many companies out there who are not doing live stream and is listening to this $1 trillion shift and wondering if they are already too late. I'd like you to give them someone who hasn't tried this, give them some 2 or 3 things they should start maybe actually doing in the next 30 to 90 days to begin building, um, to go live, to begin to build the participatory economy and the relationships with their audience that you spoke about so passionately, without maybe needing the full production requirement of Bulldog production capacity, something that a small entrepreneur out there listening, what could they start doing, listening that this is really, if you're not in it, you're missing out a lot. What could they start doing? Give them some tips.
Yeah, well, first, I don't think it's ever too late. Even though I've been doing this a very long time, to me, every conversation I have with a customer, it's almost, "Hey, we've never done this before." Whether it's a giant corporation or it's a small emerging music artist. So, having said that, I think diving in is a great way to start. And I think that the e-commerce space is brand new. And again, the market leader is TikTok Shop, which has only been around less than 3 years in the US. So TikTok's free. You can jump on that and look on live e-commerce shows. And there's also Amazon has also an offering, as does YouTube. And I believe Meta does as well. And or certainly you can buy things on Instagram. So that content is widely available. And those platforms are all in super high growth mode. In fact, I would argue there's probably not enough agencies or people to service the projected growth of those markets. And China got to 400 billion in a matter of years. Imagine what the rest of the world could get to as well. And also, I think consuming and watching live content on a platform like Netflix, I think is a great educational opportunity. But I think it all comes back to, for me, if you can show a company, whether it's a small business or it's AT&T, that they can reach and engage people in the moment and unlock a watch time of a matter of, 4, 8, 10, 12 minutes, you're certainly going to have, their attention. And just this idea of amplifying things that they do experientially. And again, it could be I've done like the NBA All-Star pregame concert for AT&T. Having said that, you could go down to your local Nissan dealership in Bethesda and say, "Hey, you're putting on this experience. Why not amplify something that maybe it's a promotion that you're doing and live, bring in some cameras and live stream that out." And the cost to do this is fallen dramatically. Cameras are, you get these beautiful, back then I think we called them GoPro cameras, but they're prosumer, really high quality. We've even used Samsung Galaxy cameras, which are, they're 4K, but if the reverse selfie is 8K, and mounted those and shot, for Qualcomm, a product discussion, if you will. So the time, this is a lot harder to do 10, 12 years ago because we had to, bring in these big cinematic cameras that are super expensive. But now the timing, the market has opened up, and I think it's an opportunity for entrepreneurs who, even if you have basic business understanding, you can now, I think, dive into this space, given there's so many possibilities, whether it's on the brand amplification side or it's on the e-commerce streaming side. I just got into business with a former NFL player who just started a beach football league. So it's full tackle football on the beach with, college or ex-pro players, and it's emerging sports leagues are propagating everywhere. Like flag
Wow.
football is now incredibly popular both for men and for women, for
Wow.
boys and for girls. These organizations need help with video and getting their video experiences up and running. So it's an interesting time, but I highly recommend for entrepreneurs those kind of tactics and those kind of research possibilities, and they're all out there and they're available.
Wow, thanks, John. That's so kind of you. And we're going to be putting John's details in the show notes. And if you need to reach out, if you need more help, he's been so kind to give you some of those tips. And I think he would even give more. The name of this podcast is The Clarity Mandate. And I believe that there are moments when clarity becomes not optional. Clarity becomes the only way when the shift is happening either in front of you or with the things that you are building, and you made that call correctly in your case 3 times. 3 times across 30 years with Prince, with AG, and now with Bulldog DM. What do you understand and recognize about those moments? What they felt like, how you know it, like how do I know it? And what it really costed you to take actions, because I believe that some of them you might not have been quite sure is this the right thing to do, that you could only have learned doing it, because it's only in hindsight once you've done that you can look like and like, wow.
Yeah, I think looking back, I could make the statement that starting a business can also be terrifying. And if I look back on actually taking the steps to do it, now I wish I had done it sooner. And a lot of that is, I think, rooted in the idea of listening and sitting down with a company or a potential partner and saying, what challenges are you facing? And I think that more often than not, they'll tell you. And luckily, I had the benefit of coming out of a big company, and I had some contacts who would actually take an informational meeting. But I think, general humanity, people are open to being helpful and sharing, provided you're not infringing upon a lot of their time. But again, I also looked at the career of somebody like Mark Cuban and really informed how I would approach this space or just any space, but not being afraid to fail. I think you learn so much from, and we make plenty of mistakes and probably fail far more often than I succeed. But I remember that's somebody famous, but said the most important 10 two-letter words in language today are, if it is to be, it is up to me. And I felt like that has been a real kind of driving force. No one's going to come and just give me money for the sake of for other reason. And also, when you operate a company, you have employees and healthcare, and you have to execute. And that's certainly a motivator.
Yeah.
But I think those words, if it is to be, it is up to me. I think you have always fueled me, and also trying to keep an eye out for where things, they always say skate to where the puck is going, not where it is, and trying to look ahead. And now I try to read voraciously. There's a little, I think one of the big helpful things is finding a great email newsletter, daily newsletter, and curating it to your interest and having that two or three of them come in the morning is really informative way I think to keep an eye on, okay, let me spend 15 minutes going through these before I start my day and see if there's a trend or development that I should be aware of. And also, I think once you start to do this, luckily I got a customer like Coca-Cola early on, and I could learn from them. They could say, here's what we want to do next. Yeah, I think an interesting point here is to, Prince was really he pushed so many boundaries that 20 years ago he was tasking us with helping him bring his content into China 20 years ago, and nobody was doing that, like nobody. And I'm like, why would he want to do that? And then I realized when I first got into business with him, Prince symbol was the sixth most recognized symbol in the world. So you have things like the dollar sign or the cross or a red cross, meaning
Mhm.
aid or, go there
Yeah.
to get help. He had that symbol was known,
Wow.
globally by a massive amount of
Wow.
people. And just by reacting to things he was interested in, I think informed us as a technology provider, just as a business. So customers are also great points of reference of where things might be going. And granted, if you're in business with an Apple or a Netflix, you can certainly see what they're doing next, and that'll tell you. But those are some of the things that I think have been really informative. But that idea of I got to do this myself, I can't wait for somebody to come and help me. It's sink or swim.
Wow, that's so powerful. Thanks, John. And as we begin to round up, any final thoughts, any key lesson you want to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, again, I really think that this space that I'm in might look like a technically challenging universe, but I think jumping into it, you can really, it's become so widely adopted. And again, with these seismic shifts of live video, e-commerce, live shopping, and platforms like Netflix and Amazon and Apple offering so much live content. I think there's never been a better time to explore it. And I know there's lots of changes going on with employment and the economy. But I think this is a pretty fascinating space that, although I've been in it for so long, it's still truly in its infancy, and there's always possibilities and always different changes and developments happening across it. And I'm happy to be a resource to any of your followers as well. I'm happy to always do transfer of knowledge in any way that I can.
Wow, this is so, so inspiring. And thank you for your kindness. And definitely, any of our listeners that needs your details, we're going to be putting it in the show notes. And if they send us direct inquiries, we would also send them to you. So, we have been having a wonderful conversation with John, who has been a pioneer who helped Prince rewrite the rules of the music industry, who built the live stream infrastructure for the world's biggest stages, and who bet more than 13 years ago on his own career and made a shift, and which has now led to him building this trillion, over $1 trillion, or unlocking over this $1 trillion global participating economy, as he puts it. So three times, John, you saw the shift before it was obvious to most people, and three times you built anyway before even the proofs of concept existed, because waiting for the proof in a world that we are now, even accelerated by AI, might mean you are never going to be there. And to everyone listening out there, you learned the lessons from everything that John has shared. If you need to make a move, make a move. If you feel a shift inside you and you are not sure, make a move anyway. If it's a wrong shift, you will adjust. Not that you should make maybe uncalculated risk, but you need to take the chances, doing the research and reaching out to people like John if you need assistance. So John has given us lots and lots to think about. The proofs will come. The question is really whether you will be ready to go out there and make that move and do what you need to do. So I am grateful to have John on our show today, and I hope our listeners will take this episode and the lessons shared seriously and make that move. And if you have interest in the streaming, I mean, everyone in business should have interest, whether it's in the e-commerce life or in the streaming, because that is really where you would be able to engage the active consumers that exist in this era. They are no longer passive. And if you want to find them, you better know how to reach them and how to communicate with them. But I just want to thank you, John. And you can reach John and Bulldog DM on their website. We would put all the details in the show notes. And I am Dr. Vivian Atud, and this has been the Clarity Mandate.